well, this is what I mean, by the way, of the type of guns that Nazis should stick to. Okay, so the way Nazis work fundamentally is they tell you that there's something that is essential to you and it's going away because powerful people, they say it's the Jews, whatever, are trying to take it away from you. So what you do is you get a person really emotionally invested in a collection of abstract ideas that can't be quantifiably tied to anything meaningful, and then you say that those things are being destroyed by X or by Y, and you venerate everything that is anti-X and Y, and you condemn everything that is conceivably pro-X or Y, but you don't actually get into any of the like standard of living stuff. What do white nationalists fight for? Culture? What the fuck is culture? Like unironically, what is white culture? Well, does it span all white people, all 1.3 billion of them? Is the culture in Poland the same as culture in America? Which part of white culture?
Right.
I tell you, I grew up in a white neighborhood. One part of America, another part of America, are they the same? What does it mean? It doesn't mean anything. It's completely and utterly meaningless. And then what you find out is most of the people who are bemoaning the death of white culture, they feel a cultural absence in their heart because they grew up in a white suburb to rich parents who didn't pay enough attention to them. And the funny thing is, the reason why those suburbs were culturally dead is because of policies deeply rooted in white supremacy.
Oh my gosh.
Suburbs are culturally dead because of the onslaught of capitalism and racially exclusionary policies that were put in place at the beginning of the creation of the suburbs. That's why. So these people are suffering a culture death from they're doing it to themselves here, and then they're blaming everybody else. It's crazy.
Holy shit, he just talked for like 3.5 minutes straight and said absolutely nothing. That was actually really impressive. He just basically talked in circles and actually said literally nothing, but I'm going to try my hardest to break it down. I might have to rewind a couple of times because he just went on an autistic rant, but I'll start with what he said at the end, that we're suffering a cultural decline, but we're doing it to ourselves. No, we're not. First of all, what do people like me, right? Because he's trying to conflate Nazis and all these other people with people like me who are just traditionalists. What do we want? We want what literally all of humans throughout history wanted up until like 50 years ago. We want to preserve our nation. We want to preserve our culture. And it's not white culture. I guess you could say that white culture is European culture because we are a European-derived country. And are all European cultures equal or the same? No. But there is something to say that we had like, Northeastern Europeans here until the 1800s, and then we brought in the Irish and the Italians, who the Anglos and stuff didn't want them in here at first, right? Because they were afraid that even though they were Europeans, they were still going to disrupt the cultural fabric and moral fabric of their country. And they had every right to feel that way. However, because they were Europeans, they were able to more easily assimilate. Because you can get any book on biology. I recommend getting The 10,000 Year Explosion or Human Accomplishment, or any book by, what's that guy's name? James Murray, the guy that wrote The Bell Curve and stuff. Well, you'll see that the biological differences between all of Europe are more negligible than any other continent, meaning that all of Europeans are more closely related than any other people. So it would make sense why, when you have a multi-ethnic but mostly European country, a European country with multiple European ethnicities, why it's more easier to assimilate. Not to mention, when we were bringing these multi-ethnic Europeans into this country, we were largely segregated in our own communities. We had Italian communities, Irish communities, etc., where people stayed with their own people, because that is the natural inclination of people. And one thing they said is capitalism is a large problem, which I actually agree with, but it's not because of racial injustice or because it's rooted in white supremacy, whatever the fuck that means. That is just complete nonsense. Yeah, everything's rooted in white supremacy, but we are going to just constantly bring in millions and millions of non-whites to replace all of the white people. And that's how we're going to keep white people in power. We're going to keep white people in power by making white people a minority in their own country. I think if this country was really white supremacist, they would probably try to do the exact opposite of that if they wanted to maintain power, which that wouldn't even be white supremacy. There's nothing wrong with having a country that was majority one race and wanting to keep that country that race. It wouldn't be Japanese supremacy if Japanese people wanted to maintain power in Japan. But of course it's white supremacy. But that's not even what it means. Supremacy means that you want to rule over other races. Supremacy means that you think you are racially superior than other races, or you think that your race is more superior than other races. I have never advocated for racial supremacy. I have never said that any race is better than another race. I have said that different races have different distinctions, which is 100% irrefutably true. And he also is saying that we are doing this to ourselves, which is complete nonsense. We did not ask for the Hart-Celler Act. Nobody voted to start bringing in millions of immigrants from non-European countries and drastically destroy the historic demographics of America. Nobody voted for that. Nobody asked for that. So saying that we did this to ourselves is complete nonsense. Also, what is European culture? European culture spans throughout history. We created Western civilization, not we, but Europeans in general, from the Roman Empire with different architecture, art, philosophy, political policies and ideologies, inventing almost everything, different food, different cultural traditions. Saying that Europe has no culture is just historically illiterate. Not only do we have culture, we probably have some of the most significant culture throughout the entire world, coming second or maybe equal to maybe China and Japan. He also said that there's abstract ideas that can't be quantifiably tied to anything. Culture and tradition are not abstract, and it can be tied to the people of a nation. It's really simple, and what he's trying to do is intellectualize why it's okay to be a degenerate like him, and why it's evil to actually have standards and care about your ancestors and your history and your nation. That's basically what this whole entire thing is. He's basically having an autistic meltdown and going on a 3.5-minute rant where he says absolutely nothing, but in his mind he is justifying why he's correct to be a disgusting, perverted human being with zero moral or sexual standards, and why people like me who actually care about Jesus Christ and my country and my people, why we're evil. Also, he said that most of the people who have my views grew up in a cultureless suburb, and we had rich parents that didn't pay enough attention to us. Definitely not the case for me, buddy. I had a complete degenerate childhood. Actually, I was a degenerate just like you only a couple of years ago, who probably believed most of the stuff that you advocate for. Besides like the tranny and gay stuff, I was always kind of against that. But for the most part, your liberal, libertarian type of ideology, that's exactly how I was only a couple of years ago. But I can guarantee you that I did not grow up in a fancy rich suburb and my rich parents didn't pay enough attention to me. So that is pure projection. I think that you probably have a very poor relationship. Actually, that is projection. Isn't his father like super rich or something? And he's talking about that, oh well, we didn't have relationships with our parents because they were rich and didn't have enough time to pay attention to us. It's like, bro, isn't your dad like a millionaire?
The most culturally enriched people in America live in diverse inner city areas.
The most culturally enriched people live in diverse areas. Where? Manhattan? Los Angeles? Do those people seem happy? Do they seem safe? Why is it that the happiest countries are the most homogenous? Look at Iceland. Look at Japan. I mean, Japan has its own problems, don't get me wrong. But when you have homogeny, or what is it, homogeny or homogeneity? I don't know. But you know what I'm trying to say. When a nation or even a community is homogeneous, you have a higher standard of living. You have a higher trust society, higher trust neighborhoods. When you have multiculturalism and multiracialism, it inevitably creates tension, implicit bias, right? You believe in that, right? When you forcefully put different people together, that inevitably causes distrust. It's just human nature. People are different, and forcing different people together creates conflict. It's not rocket science.
Live with? Yeah. It's way better to live in a super diverse where you can go out and there's a food truck and there's like crazy shit all over the place. People get...
Yeah, fuck traditionalism and keeping historical demographics and preserving your traditions and your ancestry and all of that's nonsense. We can have like Mexican food and food trucks and just like different food, you know? Like it's okay that like I feel terrified when I walk around my neighborhood at night, or that I'm afraid that my house is gonna get broken into, or nobody in my neighborhood looks like me, but you know what? It's cool because like we have different foods. If only there was a way to make these foods without drastically changing the demographics. I mean, I guess we're just gonna have to be a multicultural, multiracial, neoliberal cesspool because we can't figure out how to cook food that other cultures made.
That's not the culture they want. Even though white people are more culturally satisfied in inner city areas with lots of racial diversity than they are.
What? White people are more satisfied in multiracial neighborhoods? Are you out of your mind? What is white flight then that you're always talking about? Because it seems that every time that a suburb or a white community has minorities move in, you see a lot of white people move out to more whiter places. you see the condension. Even you could even look at Brazil, where all the Europeans and whites started condensing towards the south after slavery was over, because people wanted to live with people where they had more cultural identity with. You see this in microcosms of neighborhoods and communities where you call it white flight. So to just completely disregard that and say, no, white people like living around people that aren't like them at all, is just complete nonsense. This is all gaslighting.
White people are more culturally satisfied in inner city areas with lots of racial diversity than they are in suburbs. So what are they really fighting for? It's not the happiness of white people. It's just
Yeah, white people love living in inner cities. That's like the number one thing where all white people want to move. They go, I want to live in inner cities. I want to like move to the projects. That's where I want to live.
Essentially a political ideology to justify their hatred of minorities. That's what it always.
It's a political ideology to justify our hatred for minorities. I'm Catholic. I can't hate anybody. I don't hate anybody. I hate sin. I hate Satan. And actually, if I was going to hate anybody, it wouldn't be minorities. It would be white people like you who hate themselves and actively try to destroy their own people and fight against your own people's interests. So yeah, has nothing to do with minorities. I don't hate minorities at all. I don't hate anybody just because of any group that they belong to. What I do believe in, like I said multiple times, is freedom of association. I believe that every single group should advocate for their group interest and not be hated or labeled these ridiculous arbitrary terms like racist and Nazi and fascist and all of that nonsense, especially when virtually every single other racial group is told that they should advocate for their group interests. Black people are told all the time, Black Lives Matter. You have the NAACP, we're going to have scholarships only for black people. Same thing with Hispanics and Asians. You have all these different caucuses and stuff like that. But anytime white people want to collectivize for their group interest, or even acknowledge that white people exist as a group and have group interests, they are labeled the epitome of evil. There is clearly a double standard, and more people are waking up to this. They're even starting to talk about it on Fox News, how there's anti-white bias in virtually every institution, which is insane to me that they're even talking about that now. But that fact alone shows that more and more people are catching on to this, and you guys are just gaslighting people to try and like maintain this fantasy where like white supremacy is like this big boogeyman, which is really disgusting, especially considering that you're all white and you all are just like advocating for your own destruction. And it's because you don't have Christianity. It's because you have no moral standards. It's because you are so full of self-loathing. It's a mental illness. It really is. Ted Kaczynski talks about this, ironically, the domestic terrorist, but he's 100% right when he talks about the mentality of leftism, that they are insecure, that they want to so badly identify with victimhood and play these oppression games and stuff, and they want to feel like they're personally responsible for other people's misery. It's fucking bizarre.